Hey everyone, so my name is Helen and I just graduated from my Human Nutritional Sciences degree and I'll be starting my graduate studies in Ontario in the fall. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about the research project I did last summer. Last summer, my classmate and good friend, her name is Vineet, and unfortunately she can't be here today, but I posted a cute little picture of her right there with her permission. So we went to southern India for 3 months, and we basically interviewed the Indian residents on their perceptions on taxing sugar-sweetened beverages. So to begin, what is a sugar-sweetened beverage? So for the purpose of this project, it's defined as a beverage that has sugar added to it that is packaged and sold in stores. For example, your typical 7-Up, Pepsi, or fruit juices with sugar added to it. So with that being said, who here's ever drank a sugar-sweetened beverage? Who here still drinks sugar-sweetened beverages? Okay. Okay, so to further introduce the topic, diabetes is the most common metabolic disorder and it is on the rise globally. So consuming sugar-sweetened beverages increases your risk for diabetes and obesity, as well as long-term overweight. And in 2010, the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages resulted in 184,000 deaths worldwide, 3/4 of which occurred in low to middle income countries. For every additional can of sugar-sweetened beverage consumed, a child's odds of becoming obese increases by 60%, so that's pretty shocking, and that can be for various reasons. So research has shown that, for example, when you consume sugar-sweetened beverages, your subsequent solid food intake is not reduced, so it simply adds extra calories onto your baseline diet. So there are about 69.2 million people in the world with diabetes, and India accounts for 16.7% of the world's diabetes. So it's a country with the second highest absolute number of diabetes cases. The World Health Organization has placed a recommendation for sugar intake to be less than 10% of one's total daily calories. So based on the standard 2,000 calorie diet, that would be about 50 grams of sugar, and a can of soda can already contain about 40 grams of sugar, so that already places you at 80% of the recommendations. So the purpose of this research project was to determine the opinions of Indian residents on taxing sugar-sweetened beverages. So were they aware of it? Do they agree with it? And where do they think the revenue generated should go towards? This would give us a better idea of whether it is feasible, practical, and acceptable to implement a sugar-sweetened beverage tax in India, and whether it would lower the rates of diabetes and obesity over time, because that's ultimately the goal of the tax, the main reason the tax was proposed in the first place. So this was an ethnographic study. Recruitment was done by the snowball effect, and 11 Karnataka residents were interviewed. The interviews were in person, semi-structured, and audio recorded. The interviews were transcribed verbatim, so word for word, and codes were identified from the transcript, so these were like recurring topics. The codes were grouped into themes, which were further analyzed by inductive thematic content analysis. So these are the results that I found. There are about 46 codes there, and these codes are further grouped into themes. So there's 4 over here, which I'm going to go through each one by one. So the first theme is pleasure derived from sugar-sweetened beverages. So people alluded to how drinking sugar-sweetened beverages satisfies their taste buds more than water can, and they like to drink it when they're thirsty. It provides a really cool sensation, especially when you're wearing earphones and you're drinking a sugar-sweetened beverage, and how it's just really refreshing and relaxing, especially in the hot weather of India. The second theme is social factors. So people talked about how it's a craze and how it's just ready to drink. So it's really convenient, it's just right there. How, especially college students, so they drink it several times a day, and when people are with friends, then they might feel forced to drink it out of social obligations or social norms. The third theme is self-control. So people talked about how if they started drinking sugar when they were a child, then they'll continue drinking sugar into adulthood and they would become addicted and it would become just like a long habit. Sugar is like a drug, it makes you want to eat more and more. And on the other hand, however, people did talk about how it was an individual choice that you can control. So you could actually stop consuming sugar-sweetened beverages if you wanted to. The fourth and last theme is health. So people talked about how too much sugar is like poison for your body, how sugar is not good for the health, and there's a strong positive correlation between sugar intake and diabetes in the society, as well as the fact that sugar will create obesity. So because this was an ethnographic study, I did want to add in my personal observations. I actually didn't see a lot of sugar-sweetened beverage consumed that much. It was more like on the occasion, but what I did find was that sweetened tea and coffee were consumed a lot more. So the sweetened tea and coffee were served in about 100 milliliter teacups, and they were actually a lot sweeter than the ones served in North America. So every time Vinita and I were offered tea and coffee, we would tell them not to add sugar just because we weren't used to the level of sweetness. Sugar-sweetened beverages were sold in grocery stores, and they were relatively cheap. And the prices were also fixed because the manufacturer would imprint the price directly on the package so that there wouldn't be price differences between grocery store chains. Sugar-sweetened beverages were marketed everywhere, so they were like outside at the university, at the bus shelter. It was quite ubiquitous. Moving on to discussion. So out of the 6 people that I analyzed, 5 out of 6 agreed with taxing sugar-sweetened beverages ultimately. The revenue generated, they said, should be used towards developing India economically. For example, building roads, schools, healthcare, buildings. And interesting thing is that the low socioeconomic status Karnataka residents, they actually don't really have the luxury or disposable income to purchase sugar-sweetened beverages. So it's mostly the more affluent populations who purchase them, and this is opposite to North America, where the more affluent populations don't consume them as much, whereas the less affluent do, which can be manifested in health problems like diabetes and obesity, and yeah. So sugar itself should not be taxed because, again, the less affluent populations in India, at least where I went, sugar actually contributed to a large portion of their daily calorie intake. So in the form of like sweetened cakes, sweet rice, or other sugar-added foods that are not necessarily sugar-sweetened beverages per se. So if you tax sugar itself, then you'll raise the price of their overall cost of their diet. The decision to indulge in sugar-sweetened beverages appears to be dependent on the presence of a social group or setting and/or the affordability. So this is in despite of the perceived health risks. Some strength of the study was that it is the first qualitative study, to my knowledge, based on a literature review I conducted, done on sugar-sweetened beverage taxation. So there's a lot of quantitative studies on this topic, but it does provide like facts, figures, and numbers, but I feel like it's missing the more, I guess, emotional connection or people's actual opinions on the topic. It was a non-structured interview, so this allowed for probing on topics of interest such as diabetes and obesity. Some limitations were the small sample size. Again, only 11 people were interviewed, and only Karnataka residents. So India is a huge country, and the north and the south is so different, as are the east and the west. So, like in the context of everything, I only looked at a small portion, and only 11 people. There were clear cultural and language barriers. So I am not Indian, and that was the first time I went to India. So obviously there's a lot of cultural norms that I wasn't aware of, and it was also really difficult for me to understand the Indian residents when they were talking sometimes, just because their accents were so heavy that it was really difficult for me to understand. Lastly, the participants might have answered in a way that they thought we expected them to, or that like they might have wanted to like please us, or this is especially true because we were foreigners, and in the place that we stayed, it was mostly the local Indian people. There were like no foreigners, so you really stood out. So in conclusion, taxing sugar-sweetened beverages may be effective, but only if it's high enough, because the tax is mostly targeting the more affluent populations, since those are the people who drink it. So if it's not high enough, then they might still just continue buying it. But if it is, then it might deter them more. Whereas raising the tax won't really affect the low socioeconomic status population there, because they don't really consume sugar-sweetened beverages in the first place to begin with. Sugar-sweetened beverage consumption may be a communal problem where individual responsibility, culture, socioeconomic status, and social norms play a larger role than, for example, the perceived health risks. And residents should be educated on why the tax was proposed, because that would be another barrier and incentive not to purchase the sugar-sweetened beverages on top of the proposed tax. Sugar-sweetened beverage marketing should be reduced because, again, it was everywhere where I stayed, and it marketing does play a huge role in establishing the social norms. So lastly, these themes should be further explored, especially through qualitative research. So again, this was one research, and it was only qualitative on this topic that I saw, but I think it really does provide value because like you actually get people's opinions rather than just the facts and figures. So I hope that maybe studies like this would inspire more people to do qualitative research on this topic. So a special thank you to my supervisor, Dr. Natalie Riediger, and for you guys for listening.